Hello and welcome back. In this series, we'll be reading through some old creepypastas and seeing how well they hold up. Creepypastas were a large part of my internet surfing when I was younger. That and conspiracy theories. But with that being said, let's go back to some of the old classics. The Woman in the Oven. During the summer of 1983, in a quiet town near Minneapolis, Minnesota, the charred body of a woman was found inside the kitchen stove of a small farmhouse. A video camera was also found in the kitchen, standing on a tripod, pointing at the oven. No tape was found inside the camera at the time. Although the scene was originally labelled as a homicide by police, an unmarked VHS tape was later discovered at the bottom of the farm's well, which had apparently dried up earlier that year. Despite its worn condition, and the fact it contained no audio, police were still able to view the contents of the tape. It depicted a woman recording herself in front of a video camera, seemingly using the same camera that the police found in the kitchen. After positioning the camera to include both her and her kitchen stove in its view, she turned on the oven, opened the door, crawled inside, and then closed the door behind her. After 8 minutes into the video, the oven could be seen violently shaking. At this point, thick black smoke emanated from it. For the remaining 45 minutes of the video, until the batteries in the camera died, it remained in its stationary position. To avoid disturbing the local community, the police never released any information about the tape, or even the fact that it was found. Police were also not able to determine who put the tape in the well, or why the height and stature of the woman in the video did not come close to matching the body that they found in the oven. Okay, so this one is short and sweet, which is actually how I preferred my creepypasta stories back in the day. I wasn't a big fan of the long, multiple character arc type stories, but that was just me. I mess around with some longer ones these days. I prefer open-ended creepypastas where it's a mystery to what happens at the end. So this one gets a pass from me. The Rake. During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, and most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primarily focused in rural New York State and once found in Idaho, self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remained powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book. A Suicide Note, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke, I felt his presence. And for once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear, and what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. A journal entry translated from Spanish, 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. A mariner's log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake. From a witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 AM, I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used that moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he had got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly, his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large, hairless dog of some sort. Its body was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, and then crawled quickly into a flailing sort of motion, right along the bed, until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he could hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara. The creature ran downstairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspapers took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages, and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visits were one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night. Every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blowing through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found to be a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when I was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head makes me very upset. I have not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night, I'll wake up to see him staring at me. Like me, I'm a stare. So this is obviously a timeless classic, still holds up today as a creepy cryptid demon encounter story. It also gets a pass for being the granddaddy of all pale, tall and skinny creatures that every author and their nan's cat wrote about after it. And on to the final creepypasta, the statue. A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the 2 children were already fast asleep in bed, so the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and decided to watch TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs, because they did not have cable downstairs. The parents didn't want children watching too much garbage, so she called them and asked if she could watch the cable in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the angel statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth, because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't own an angel statue." The police found both of the children and the babysitter slumped in pools of their own blood within 3 minutes of the call. No statue was found. I mean, it's short and to the point. It definitely feels like it was probably written by a kid at the time and was only a few steps away from being like an amazing story I found on Reddit called My Crappy Childhood Story. And here it is as a bonus. My Crappy Childhood Story. My mum said, when I was little, when I would look at the wall for a long time, I thought nothing of it, till she said, "You playing with a friend Kelly? My sister died when I was a baby. I never went near that room again." That's pretty good. Thank you for listening. If you have any suggestions or stories you'd like me to narrate, comment below or contact me on Twitter, which is linked below in the description box. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay safe out there.